Since I've been preaching from this pulpit, I'm not sure how many times I might have said that we live in stressful times and we live in good times, but I'll say it again today. We live in stressful times, like too much traffic, a gasoline tanker turning over on 15 just yesterday and killing the driver and setting a house on fire. I've always watched those houses on Apple Avenue as you go down 15 and wondered, too close for comfort for me. We live in stressful times, and remember those people. Some people just have a leaky roof. Some people have no home. Too many things to do at work, a cranky boss, a teacher who doesn't like us. Should have saved that for the kids while they were still here. I know those kinds of things stress us out, but we also live in times of many blessings. Beautiful, lovely, inspiring, stirring music. Our children, our grandchildren, a new lover. We delight in them. Like a delicious meal shared with some friends. Like one more week of winter of 2023 without snow, and I know that's not a blessing for some of you. I know. Or illness overcome and renewed health. A beautiful, meaningful Ash Wednesday service with music that thrilled and inspired us just a couple of weeks ago. But can we get stuck? Indeed, it is more often that we get stuck in the stressors, I think. It depends on our personality, of course. We live in between the stressors and the blessings of our lives, and we try to hold them together somehow as we live in between and in the middle. How we live in that space in between, or in that chasm or gap between what is and what we would like to be like, is a challenge. Between being in control and being out of control. Between what is certainly known and that side of life that we just don't understand. The tensions between that which allures us to the edge of what we know makes sense and works and fits our life's values, and that place that is bound somehow to lead us over the edge into the dark valley below. Today I'm concerned about that tension between our separation from God and the deep connection that we all desire. My very best definition of sin, as I have studied this in all sorts of different ways over the years, is that sin is anything that we do that separates us from ourselves, from each other, or from God. So in that respect, I'm concerned about that in-betweenness, that dark place between what separates us and that which connects us. That connects us to others and to God. You know, one of the great reasons we all know that we come here for worship, or we join worship online even, is to be connected, to be in community, in relationship with each other, to be with the people we can trust, to trust with our joys and concerns, to trust with our hopes and dreams, to trust with our questions and doubts, even to trust with our very lives. So how deeply we trust ourselves, others, and yes, even how deeply we trust God with our lives has a strong influence, and how connected we are with each other and with God. Also, can we have a strong influence on how well we handle the stressors and the blessings, how to handle living in the in-between. This is one of the tensions in which we live. Can I trust you? I know that in my conversations with people, with young people especially, with anyone, is can I trust you? Can I trust my family? And I hear too many people saying, not everybody in my family. Can I trust my teacher or my friend? Can I trust my church? Can I trust my pastor? Can I share something sensitive or express some doubt to a friend in confidence? And the first thing you know, you're hearing this from someone else. We once had two neighbors, and I discovered that they talked to each other. And I tested that out once by telling something that only this person would know. It was a couple, 4 or 5 days later, that I heard the same thing from the other neighbor about me. Well, I watch what I say to either one of them. I used to anyway, when I lived near them. And then you say to yourself, I'll never trust them again. Or they'll certainly have to earn my trust. And as a result, you separate yourself from that person, another lost relationship in our lives. This question of trust, this tension between separation and connection, shows up in both our scripture lessons today. In Genesis, God is searching for someone God can trust. God's discovered along the way from creation on that people were not trustworthy. They wanted to change things. They wanted to be their own God. They wanted to be in control. So in Genesis, God is searching for someone God can trust, someone who will lead the people to be God's people. As the creation story goes, humanity had not trusted God. They refused God's law. They tried to create their own gods that they thought they could control. And in the process, they became separated from God's love. But one of the marvelous mercies of the stories of the Hebrew Scriptures especially is that God keeps giving the people another chance. Another chance. And then God found Abram and entrusted God's work of recreating, rebirthing God's people to Abram. And so Abram went on as the Lord had told him. And in the midst of this journey, God changed Abram's name. A great act of trust and affirmation. Changed his name to Abraham. And God trusted Abraham, and Abraham trusted God. And thus, they are deeply connected. And even though we did not read the epistle lesson appointed for today, in Romans chapter 4, we hear again about this great holy promise that God gave Abraham. In Romans, we are told that God didn't entrust the great mission to Abraham because something Abraham did or would do. No, it was based on God's decision to put everything together for Abraham, which then Abraham accepted and believed. One translation of this passage says it's this way, that if those who get what God gives them only get it by doing everything they are told to do and filling out all the right forms properly signed, that eliminates personal trust completely and turns the promise into an ironclad contract. That's not a holy promise. That's a business deal. A contract drawn up by a hard-nosed lawyer with plenty of fine print only makes sure that you will never be able to collect. But if there is no contract in the first place, simply a promise, and God's promise at that, you can't break it. This is why the fulfillment of God's promise depends entirely on trusting God in God's way, and then simply embracing God and what God does. God's promise arrives as pure gift for us. As you see, my friends, it is this pure gift that we experience the deep spiritual connection that we desire so much. The spiritual connection that Trish was talking about with her boys and with the girls this morning. Love that is freely given is so much more likely to be freely received. You know what I mean. That's also the kind of love that grows and grows. The kind of love that brings us out of our isolation into relationship with the world. I almost jumped out of my study chair this week when I read these two simple sentences in my journal. And I wish I wrote them. I'm not sure. They may be quotes, but I've lost the thread. God's acceptance of sinners is grace. Our acceptance of God's grace is faith. God's acceptance of us as sinners is grace. And our acceptance of God's grace is faith. This is precisely the gift Nicodemus must be seeking to understand in our lesson from John's Gospel today. Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a so-called religious leader who is, get this, separate from other religious people. And Nicodemus came to Jesus by the cover of night. And last night in the cover of night, I've gone through this story with Nicodemus and this conversation too many times to have gotten a good night's sleep. Why did Nicodemus come at night? What did he really want from Jesus? What was he hiding from? What was he hoping to find? Some scholars suggest that Nicodemus came under the cover of night because he didn't trust the other Pharisees if he were seen by them going to Jesus. Can we say Nicodemus came because he could not wait until morning? I could not wait till the morning to get up and greet Nicodemus awake. He could not wait another minute to bring his questions and needs for light to Jesus. We should be reminded that when Jesus went out from the upper room to betray Jesus, it was nighttime. It was dark. And what Judas was about to do was clouded in the darkness of separation from his friends, from the other disciples, from Jesus, ultimately from God. But with Nicodemus, he came to see the light out of darkness. The good news this morning, to use Jesus' explanation to Nicodemus, is this: to be born again is to accept God's offer of love and be changed by the gift of grace. In some ways, Nicodemus is like Dante, who begins the Divine Comedy with these words: in the middle of the journey of our life, I came to myself in a dark wood where the straight way was lost. That is to say, when I was disconnected from all that matters the most, I came to myself, knowing I needed to be renewed, to be reborn. Broken relationships are sometimes repaired, redeemed, reborn, but rarely, if ever, from only things that one person does or the other. Excuse me. Real redemption comes from God's gift of grace. Our acceptance of that gift is our faith reborn in each other. I know I'm out of time, but I need to say this bit more, just a bit, about this phrase, born again. For some folks, the folks I grew up with, the church I went to as a child and young person, is once saved, always saved. You walk down the aisle at 9 years old and say, I want to trust Jesus, and period. That's the end of it. I always felt like I didn't need to do anything else. I did all that was required. But what might that mean if we imagine that Jesus wasn't leading Nicodemus to such a once and for all, over and done with turnaround, but rather saying, Nicodemus, you must be born again, and again, and again. Keeps coming. So if, like Nicodemus, you must come to be yourself in the middle of a dark wood or a dark night where you have lost your way, you too can come to Jesus and make him Lord of your life over and over and over again. And I tell you, it gets better every time. Maybe in the midst of the tensions of our lives, you will be connected again and again. Maybe it will not be the end, but just the beginning for a long and astonishing journey in relationship with God. May it be so with you and with me this day. Amen.